Matthew, the 23rd chapter. If you remember last week, we was talking about Jesus was confronting the scribes and the Pharisees and how they were basically all show. They wanted to be seen by men, telling people not to just, you may hear what they say, but don't do what they do. Then it says there at verse 12, whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. He's wanting you to understand those folks may be in a high place right now, but they're not going to be later. Let's look at verse 13 is where we're going to start at this morning. Verse 13 of chapter 23 of Matthew. Now mine has at the top there of the heading, it says 8 woes. We don't use that term much today. When you hear the term woe unto you, what does that mean? In our part of the world, it means you're on a horse and saying, whoa. But back then, what did it mean?
Whoa, you're going to be in trouble.
You better pay attention. Yeah, pay attention. He's going to have 8 things here he's going to bring out about the Pharisees and the scribes. And I mean, he's going to talk as blunt as you can be. I'll just put it that way. And I want to look at it as we go through these 8 things. How can you and I today learn from those? Okay? Let's look at verse 13, which will start at the first one. But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you shut off the kingdom of heaven from people, for you do not enter yourselves, nor do you allow those who are entering to go in. Now you stop and think about what he's just said here. Woe unto you, you people, because what? Because you shut off the kingdom of heaven from people. For you do not enter yourselves, nor do you allow those who are entering to go in. What are these people doing? What are they doing that he's bringing out?
Hey, Phil, are the scribes and Pharisees kind of bosses over?
Well, they're the leaders. They're the Jewish leaders of the religious part of the Jewish people.
I'm glad our president's not like that.
They're applying traditions to the law that makes it almost impossible to follow.
Let me ask you this. Did the scribes and Pharisees believe in Jesus? Who he was, what he stood for? No. So since they didn't believe in the kingdom of heaven to come, they didn't allow anybody else. Because what was the purpose of the Pharisees and the scribes in relation to what they'd done? What was their purpose? What was their job, we might say? To teach. Okay. Let me ask you this. It's hard for us sometimes to realize what we're talking about. Did they have this back then? They didn't have the written word. We need to remember that. So the law they had was from the old. Did each person have a copy of the law to check back and say, I did this? No. Who did they go to find out what the law said? Scribes and the Pharisees. Hence the reason he said, you did not enter yourselves, you didn't believe, but you didn't let anybody else hear the word. Let me ask you this, how does that relate to us today? What can we get from that?
We need to be careful and make sure it's being taught right, whether it's your preacher or a deacon, an elder, or whatever.
See, they were hindering the word. They were hindering people from learning. Does that happen today? Let me ask you this. Are there people that are learning the wrong thing? When you hear the wrong thing, what does that lead to? Doing the wrong thing. Just something to think about as we go through. Verse 14 now. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you devour widows' houses, and for a pretense you make long prayers, therefore you will receive greater condemnation.
Hey, Bill, who was that praying for? Against, I mean, that's two of them.
Let's read that one more time, Jerry. He's bringing out, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, because you travel around, oh, excuse me, I went down the wrong verse. Because you devour widows' houses, and for a pretense you make long prayers, therefore you will receive a greater condemnation.
Well, they were praying to God, but because they did believe in God,
Mm-hmm.
they just did not believe Jesus was who he said he was. And so, they thought the longer and the louder they prayed, the more.
Well, they look more religious, yeah. But look at the part when it says, you devour widows' houses. What does that mean? What did they do?
Sell them, I guess, take them away from them.
You mean there's people that took advantage of widows back then?
That kind of people.
You mean are there people today that take advantage of people like that today? Yeah. Yeah.
They call it business nowadays.
Exactly. Exactly. Here they took advantage of people we might call that are in need or weak, we might say. Defenseless, I think another term I've seen. And then after they take advantage of these people, here they make these long prayers, making them look like they are really religious. Oh, look how much long a prayer he made. Now look at the next part. After saying that, they said, therefore, you will receive a greater condemnation. What does that mean? A greater condemnation. We can look at this any way you want to. They've got an answer for that.
And that's when he tells, later on, they tell anyone that publicly teaches to be careful what you're doing, because if you accept that, if you take
Yeah.
on that responsibility, he uses that. And, with elders, he uses that
Exactly.
phrase, exactly.
Just like teachers, elders, all that.
And any Christian that was a Christian and then falls away from it.
That's right. That's right. So, when you read things like that and you start and look at the deeper meaning of it, shouldn't we be careful what we say? Shouldn't we be careful what we teach? Shouldn't we be careful of the actions we have outside these four walls? You better. You better. Verse 15 now. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. Do you see a theme here? Do you see what he's saying? I mean, he's talking to them right in their face, we might say. Because you travel around on sea and land to make one proselyte, and when he becomes one, you make him twice as much a son of hell as yourselves. Okay, that one there, what is he talking about?
Teaching them the wrong thing.
Could be. What's he saying there? That's terms we don't use a lot today.
Because they're not teaching the truth. When they convert somebody, they're teaching them wrong, and it makes that person wrong too.
It could be that could be part of it, and I think you're right, Cheryl, on that they're teaching him wrong. And that's the reason you bring out as much a son of hell as yourselves. You're leading him astray.
Well, not only do they have to answer for their actions, but they have to answer for his actions because, in a sense of the word, everybody's
Yeah.
responsible for their own actions, but when you teach somebody wrong, then you have that to answer for also, not just yourself.
Does that apply to us today? So that means if you teach someone wrong, you've got to answer for that? not only have you messed yourself up, you've led that person astray that you was trying to teach. That's kind of scary, isn't it? So what does that make us need to do? You need to know what you're doing. You need to know what you're saying when you talk to someone about Christ. Okay? Verse 16 now. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, whoever swears by the temple, that is nothing. But whoever swears by the gold of the temple is obligated. You fools and blind men, which is more important, the gold or the temple that sanctifies the gold? And whoever swears by the altar, that is nothing. But whoever swears by the offering on it is obligated. You blind men, which is more important, the offering or of the altar that sanctifies the offering? Therefore, whoever swears by the altar swears both by the altar and by everything on it. Whoever swears by the temple swears both by the temple and by him who dwells within it. Whoever swears by heaven swears both by the throne of God and him who sits upon it. Whew. What does that mean? That's a lot of terms we don't use a lot today. What is he saying? We always heard you don't swear. You don't make an oath. What are we saying here? What is he saying? What he's wanting you to understand, they were putting more emphasis on things instead of God.
Hey, Phil, I've been on juries and they'd make you put your hand on the Bible and swear.
Yeah.
Well, that's not swearing against God, that's just saying.
Affirming that you're going to do what's right, tell the truth. I understand. Yeah. We use that term a little different than what he's wanting you to understand here. These things that we're seeing around, it's like me swearing to this podium, that don't mean nothing. You see what he's saying? That don't mean nothing. It's all about what's God. Why are you here? Who are we worshiping here? That's what we need to remember. This stuff is just stuff. Our purpose is to serve God. Serve God. That's our purpose. And that's what he's wanting to bring out. That's what he's wanting them to understand, which they have not been doing. You have to remember, the Pharisees and the scribes and all those folks, everything, we talked about it earlier, tradition, pomp and circumstance. They did a lot of it by what they wore on down to what they did, where they sit. Everything was all about being seen and looked upon like, look at me, I'm religious and you're not. You see the kind of people that we're dealing with here. That's the reason Jesus, every time you talk about one of these woes, what's the word right after scribes and Pharisees? Hypocrite. That's another word we don't use a lot today. That means someone that does something, says something else, or says something and does something else.
You talk to non-Christians that they use that word first thing. I'm familiar with it.
They know what that means, don't they? That's right. That's right. Yeah. Verse 23 now. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you tithe mint and dill and cumin, and have neglected the weightier provisions of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. But these are the things you should have done without neglecting the others. You blind guides who strain out the gnat and swallow a camel. Can you get a mental picture of that? Look what he's saying here. This is one right here that we need to look at. It says here you're worried about tithing the mint and the dill and the cumin and all that stuff. But he said what? You have neglected the weightier provisions of the law. such as justice, mercy, faithfulness. These are the things you should have done without neglecting the others. Now think about those things that he's just brought out. We talked about the kind of folks they were. Okay? Here they make this big deal about the tithe of the mint and all this. But he said, now you neglected the things such as justice and mercy and faithfulness. Those are the things that we need to have as Christians, right? We must have. When it says justice, mercy, and faithfulness, what comes to your mind with those three things?
Not like they did earlier to the widows, take their houses away.
We've seen that they've been taking advantage of people. Yeah. Yeah.
Characteristics of Jesus.
Exactly. Exactly. We know justice. They weren't fair in their dealings. We know that. We've seen all the things that the Pharisees have done. We know that they were not fair in their dealings with others. We know they didn't show much mercy, did they? They didn't show much mercy. What about the widows we just talked about, them taking their houses? I mean, you can't have mercy and do that kind of stuff. Faithfulness. They were more worried about traditions than being faithful.
If they knew the old law, in Micah 8, it says, you know, what does the Lord require of you but to do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God?
There you go. Yeah. They had lost sight of the true law. They had lost sight. They were more worried about their own position and their own traditions than they were about serving God.
You know, I'm reading more and more, like this week I've been reading in Deuteronomy. Clearly it outlines all the very specific laws.
Mhm.
And throughout that, it says you're to care for the fatherless, the widow, the poor. All that mercy is built into that, even though all those rules and regulations, so to speak, are set.
That's true. That's
And
true.
it seems like somehow they didn't grasp that other part of it.
Well, that require effort on their part. You know, stepping down to beneath them.
Yeah.
And it's just like us today. Isn't that part of our Christian walk? Is to have that mercy, show that to others? Yeah.
Surely they weren't that perfect in keeping the law.
Oh no, no. But who's going to straighten them out though? You think about it. I mean, there has nobody said anything like this to these people before. Here Jesus came up here and him calling them hypocrites. Can you imagine their blood boiling? I can imagine.
And you know, we've got to keep in mind what you said before, they didn't have the written word.
They didn't,
So
yeah.
people were at the mercy of those that had access to it. Of course, your scribes were part of the ones that transcribed.
That's right.
You know, so, you know, they were at their mercy in a sense because that's all they had.
That's right. That's right.
Don't you think it's just like today, power corrupts? You know, it's just like, the more power you get, the more you want. And it's just like, they say, you know, if you're rich, it's harder for a rich man.
Yeah.
But the more you get,
That's
then the power goes from there. But
That's
we have to
exactly
watch.
true.
We have to watch how that.
It all ties together,
And
don't it?
you've seen it all the way through history and today.
Exactly. It's still happening today. Still happening today. That last verse 24 right there, it says, you blind guides. What kind of term would that be for them? Here, you're supposed to be leaders. You're supposed to be guiding the people. And you're blind. You're not guiding them as you should. Okay? Who strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. What does he mean there?
They nitpick about the little things.
There you go. Yeah. You're worried about little old bitty things, and the big things are eating you up. Do we do that today? Do you worry about little bitty things that you can't do nothing about? And the big things are stepping all over. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we do.
And you know, and sometimes big disagreements come not from really the big things. They
Oh.
come from, we're just as bad today sometimes with tradition.
Sure we are.
Because, you know, if anything changes, and it's just a matter, some can't handle it.
And we nitpick about the little thing. You know, whether it's true or not, I've heard a church splitting over the color of the carpet. And you think about what I just said. It wasn't because it was scriptural that they broke up, because they didn't like the color of the carpet. Now you think about that. There's a bigger issue that they need to be facing instead of the carpet. I can tell you that. But we worry about little bitty things instead of worrying about the big things that we can change. It's something for us today as Christians. What can we take from that? What can we take from that in our daily walk? Don't worry about them little things you can't do nothing about. How many of us worry about things that we can do nothing about, that usually never comes to fruition? But we worried about it for a week. And then it usually don't even happen. And I'm guilty of that. Yes. Yeah. And something that I could have done something about, I didn't. Because I was too worried about. You see what he's saying here? Kind of get your perspective here. See what's important. What's something that you can do something about. And don't worry about that little stuff that you can't. Verse 25 now. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and of the dish, but inside they are full of robbery and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisee! First clean the inside of the cup and of the dish, so that the outside of it may become clean also. Okay, what's he saying here? You're worried about the outside, not the inside? Are there people today that do the same? You mean there's people today that's worried about what's on the outside than what's on the inside? There you go. That's what the Pharisees were doing. They worried about what everybody else seen and not what they were doing. He's telling them what? Get your inside right. The outside will take care of itself. Boy, that's something that kind of hits us in the face, don't it? We ought to take a look at this. Let's worry about our relationship with God. What's in the inside. Worry about our soul. Don't worry about the outside appearance as much. Because if you're serving God, you're not worried about that outside quite as much. Okay? You've got your priorities right. That's it. That's it. And that's what he's wanting them to understand. They didn't do that. They wasn't worried about what was on the inside. They only worried about what people seen. What people seen. Verse 27. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like whitewashed tombs, which are on the outside appear beautiful, but on the inside they are full of dead man's bones and all uncleanliness. So you too outwardly appear righteous to men, but inwardly you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. That's exactly what we was talking about earlier. This just goes right along with it. These people were worried about what people seen, the appearance. But on the inside, they were full of dead man's bones and uncleanliness.
Some are better about walking around doing that than others.
Exactly.
It creates a lot of pain.
It does. You're right. What was it?
He was quite honest, he didn't really much of it.
He didn't pull anything out. I mean,
He just told the truth.
And he even brought it down. Here he called them a whitewashed tombs, but he wanted to even bring it down in verse 28. He brought it to them personally, where they didn't misunderstand. So you too outwardly appear righteous to men, but inwardly you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. He's just talking as straight to these Pharisees as they've ever been talked to. Ever. No one dared to talk to the Pharisees like this. Not only that, but every time he called them hypocrites. I don't know about y'all, but that's one thing I do not want to be called, is a hypocrite. What you see is what you get. I want to be as straightforward as I can be. I'm not perfect, but I want you to know that it's straight. I'm not putting up a front. And that's what these people here were doing. We're going to stop right there. Time's up. We'll take up with verse 29 next week. Thank you for your comments this morning.